gal that loves to have a gander at some beautifully painted Warhammer miniatures, so it only makes sense that I also love Golden Demon. I regularly attend it, occasionally enter it, and have even managed to scrape together a handful of finalist pins in my time. And then I painted those finalist pins, and then I entered Golden Demon with the finalist pins that I won for entering Golden Demon. That's how much I like it. But most of all, I just genuinely love the spectacle of it all, and I love keeping up to date with all of the winners, finalists, and just the entries in general every single year. But over the years, and I think especially recently, I've noticed something change at Golden Demon. Both me and basically everybody with functioning eyeballs in the Warhammer community has noticed that recently the standard at these Golden Demon competitions has just been insanely high. Like every single year, it seems like the artists are creating these Warhammer dioramas and pieces which not only knock the previous year out of the park, but also stretch the limitations of what a miniature painting competition can actually be. But Golden Demon didn't always look like this. In fact, the winning miniatures from the very first Golden Demons looked more like this. And that got me thinking, how did we get to this point? Like, when and how did Warhammer painters start becoming so insanely good at painting Warhammer? So in this video, we are going to use some modern technology to dive back in time through the archives of Golden Demon's history to see what high-end miniature painting used to look like and track which painting styles and trends went in and out of fashion. And most importantly, try and work out just when and how Golden Demon painters got so good. Back in time, whoosh, whoosh. First of all, I want to say a quick Happy New Year to everyone watching my channel right now in 2025. Happy New Year, everyone. Happy 2025. More like 2020, thrive. No, that sucks. I hope that everyone had at least a semi-restful-ish and nice holiday season. But also, if you've never watched my channel and you're new here, then hello and welcome. I like to make Warhammer, miniature painting, and general hobby content and have a lot of fun doing it. So if you like what you see here today, please consider subscribing to my channel for more. And if you really like what you see here today, then you can support me over on my Patreon, which means that I will be able to make more videos like this for the rest of my life. I'm trapped here because of you. Thank you. But yes, today we're going to be talking about Golden Demon, which, if you're not in the know, is a Warhammer miniature painting competition, or perhaps I should say the Warhammer miniature painting competition, held once or twice a year by Games Workshop themselves, where miniature painters from all over the world congregate to test their mettle against each other and walk away with either some neat Golden Demon trophies or the ultimate prize, the Slayer Sword. The competition was started in 1987 by the highly esteemed founding Games Workshop visionary himself, John Blanche. And whilst I can't speak for him, I think they came up with the idea of Golden Demon to kind of add a little bit of flavour and spice to their then quite small games days, which they held every single year. And because who doesn't want to see a bunch of extremely cool painted Warhammer miniatures in one place? Like, a miniature painting competition held by Games Workshop just makes sense. From then on, Golden Demon has been held every single year in various countries and at various events and locations, now not only located in the UK. Except over COVID times, when I think they had like 2 years where there were no Golden Demons held at all, because we were all inside trying not to die instead. That was fun. That was good. But like I said before, my mission today isn't to show you guys all of the latest winners of Golden Demon like I usually do. It is to dive back in time into the competition's history and look at some of the winners from the past. And to do that, we are going to be using the Golden Demon Compendium. The whole site is an incredible resource created by some very talented fellow miniature painting and Golden Demon fans, which has a bunch of cool features which allow you to do stuff like track which people have won the most trophies, look at a singular artist's entries over their entire career, and even look at entries from every single Golden Demon ever held, which is exactly what we are going to be doing today. So let's start at the very beginning, at the very first Golden Demon held in 1987. And cue the 80s music. I'll be dancing to this, I'm sure. The first ever recorded Golden Demon was held on the 27th of June 1987 at the Victoria Leisure Centre in Nottingham, which funnily enough is where I go swimming and is literally 1 minute from my studio. Like, I can basically see it from my window. But despite the fact that the very first competition was held nearly 40 years ago, things like the categories and the general setup don't look that different from the modern Golden Demons that we see today. There were pretty similar categories like single miniature, diorama, but with some quirkier categories involved too, like banner, conversion, and dragon, and there were awards, and yes, even a Slayer sword winner. Also, I initially missed this during my research, but the first Golden Demon actually had cash prizes. Like, you could win, I think, around £250 for placing, and in this article about the history of Golden Demon written by Albert Moretto Font, it says that they gave away £3,000 in prize money at this very first event, which even by today's standards seems really wild. But the main difference, which is instantly visible apart from just the miniatures themselves looking a little bit older and more dated, is the painting style, which was winning big at this event. Let's start by looking at the single miniature category so we can kind of get a taste for what was going on. And as you can see, the style at the time was pretty simple, and I mean that with all the love in my heart because I love these miniatures very, very much. And if you're sat there at home thinking, of course these miniatures look a little bit weird and maybe basic because the image quality is kind of terrible and looks like it's about 40 years old because it is 40 years old, then you are absolutely correct. So here is a bronze winning entry taken under a modern camera. And as you can see, it's very much the same style that I kind of described. It's good for sure, but it's safe to say that it probably wouldn't win a Golden Demon these days. But let's bear in mind that at modern Golden Demon, some participants have been painting miniatures, watching tutorials, and practicing their craft for maybe like 30 plus years. So it's no wonder that things have improved. Like, that's kind of obvious. But despite all that, I think that the main standout for this first year of Golden Demon was people's creativity in what was, at the time, a brand new hobby. We can see a lot of experimenting in freehanding, especially on the cloaks and the banners, and most of all, a lot of sculpting and converting of miniatures. And basically it feels like there's just a whole lot of fun and whimsy going on. Like, look at this Terminator banner. It's absolutely hilarious, but would be instantly disqualified at any modern Golden Demon. The overall winner of the very first Golden Demon was this stunning orc chieftain on a dragon, and I think it's still absolutely wonderful in every single way, and definitely set the tone for the rest of the entries which would come in the decade. Even by the second year of the Golden Demon competition being a thing, you can really see the Warhammer fans of the time catching that miniature painting competition bug. And the small, by today's standard, amount of people taking part in the competition started to get even wilder and more creative with their entries. During the rest of the 80s, we see even more of these kind of big or very wacky conversion style entries winning the trophies. Like this iconic Chaos Mammoth entry, which I remember seeing years ago and absolutely loving, and this immense chariot which won the Slayer sword in 1989. I feel like now is a good time to talk about, or maybe even introduce you to, the concept of a Golden Demon meta, which in this instance essentially just means something which is impressive, currently in style, or is rated highly at the competitions, which then turns into kind of like trends that you see a lot of painters use in their entries. Think things like non-metallic metallics, plinths, and resin pours. Those are some pretty modern examples of what people refer to as Golden Demon metas. And through my research, I think I've deducted that the very first Golden Demon meta was freehanding and banners. These elaborately painted banners and free-handed details that we see on these older miniatures, I think demonstrate that whilst the miniature painting hobby in general was fairly new at the time, there were still a bunch of super talented artists with pre-existing talent who were eager to transfer their 2D painting skills onto 3D miniatures. miniatures, and this seems to be the way that they kind of flex that skill, which is awesome to see. But I think the thing that really encapsulates the vibe of the 80s Golden Demons, even though there was only 2 or 3, was just the strangeness of it all. Everything just seems to be really weird and wacky and funny and whimsical and creative, from the paint jobs to the conversions to the miniatures themselves. And like I've said before, that is probably because Warhammer itself was very young and still trying to work out what it wanted to be, and both Games Workshop and its customers at the time were being influenced by all the other weird fantasy tropes going on at the time as well. So let's move on now from the fantasy-fueled fever dream, which was the 80s, and see what Golden Demon looked like during Warhammer's obnoxious childhood period, the 90s. During the 90s, Games Workshop started to develop a pretty strong sense of identity, with 40k and Warhammer Fantasy now in full swing, and concepts like orcs, Eldar, and Space Marines beginning to look like concepts that we would recognize today. But how did this shift into a more thought-out and rigid set of IPs affect our Golden Demon artists and the competition in general? Because time and the mindsets of people don't really reset when the clock rolls over into a new decade, we're still seeing a lot of that weird, busy, heavily kit-bashed and hand-sculpted wackiness that we saw in the 80s. And good, because I absolutely adore this era of miniature painting. However, as we start to move into the early competitions of the 90s, we do see something very subtle start to change. There's less banners and more Space Marines. Nice, clean, and neatly painted Space Marines. And I don't know what happened in this year, but it feels like in 1994 specifically, something just clicked and all of the entries started to look kind of, well, like 90s Warhammer. The focus was no longer on these green and brownish fantasy tones and free-handed sepia banners with an almost painterly style, but now on these iconic bold primary colors with intensely bright highlights and the stark visual contrast that we all associate with 90s Games Workshop. And I think that the 40k category in the 90s seems to be the one pushing the participants away from the style that we saw in the late 80s. We see a lot more of this crisper, cleaner style with smooth gradients and sharp edge highlights in this category specifically. And most importantly, already by 1997, a full decade after the very first Golden Demon took place, even though a lot of it happened subtly over time, I think we can already see a massive improvement in the quality of the entries themselves. But whether it's because the heavy metal painters were setting the trend, or by this time Games Workshop had produced at least one book on how to paint miniatures, or because people had had 10 years to sit at home with no internet and practice miniature painting, throughout the 90s we keep seeing this bold and saturated style progress and become more refined and perfected by the painters. But there's still nothing in the 90s which looks anything like the gritty, realistic style that we see in a lot of modern Golden Demons, so let's try and work out when that started happening and move into one of my favourite eras of Games Workshop history, the noughties. At the beginning of the noughties, Games Workshop was a pretty well-established high street staple, and everyone either knew, had, or were the nerdy friend who painted Warhammer, so Games Workshop was kind of becoming a household name. And you can see that reflected by the fact that Games Workshop events were just getting bigger and bigger, as by the early 2000s they'd gone from these small fests held at local leisure centres to full-blown dedicated games days held at massive venues. But this new rise in Games Workshop's popularity added a new element to Golden Demon specifically, which is now part of every single competition, and that is that Golden Demon became an international competition. Using this cool feature on Golden Demon Compendium, you can literally see exactly when more and more people from outside of the UK started to travel to the UK just to enter Golden Demon. And if you're already a fan of Golden Demon, then you will know that those Europeans kick our ass every single year, so this is when that started happening, so that's fun. But as early as the year of the new millennium itself, something starts to change at Golden Demon. And no, I don't mean that the image quality of the entries got a little bit higher, though that is a very welcome addition to this video. No, I mean the painting style. Because during this era at Golden Demon, things do a complete 180 from the 90s and start to get grimdark. There's actual weathering, which we haven't really seen much of before. There's darker, more gritty color schemes, and the painting style has become more realistic in general and more lifelike, rather than something you'd see in a cartoon or fantasy illustration. This winning miniature from 2002, especially for me, feels like a step into a new generation of Golden Demon painting standards for the competition to come. It's realistic and gritty, sure, but it also demonstrates artistic creativity and free-handed detail on a whole new level, which is something we see more often than not in today's modern Golden Demon competitions. But what's the most crazy to me is that in the span of just 5 years, which at the time when the internet wasn't as prevalent as it is today, so trends don't come and go as quickly as they do nowadays, we see that bright and saturated 90s style all but disappear. In fact, by 2004, it's pretty much entirely been replaced with far more muted colors and realistically weathered paint jobs, which look almost modern. But one of my favorite things about this era is that we start to see some names winning their first Golden Demons, and those names will keep getting more and more familiar over the next 20 years. Now, even though I'm wrong and time has moved on, I still consider the 2010s to be like modern Warhammer, and I still think that miniatures released in 2014 were released 5 years ago, and that kind of scares me. But this is the decade where I started to really get into Warhammer and miniature painting, and also when I started working for Games Workshop. But I think it's also when I remember Golden Demon entries starting to get really, really good. Like, really good. People are taking this stuff seriously now and are aiming for gritty, high-end paint jobs and are less focused on things like banners, colors, and kit bashing. Now we have realistic rendering, battle damage, weather effects, and plinths. But if the 80s was about banners and kit bashing, the 90s bright colors and saturation, and the early 2000s about grim, dark, gritty realism, then I think the 2010s was the start of the rise in popularity of non-metallic metallics. Love them or hate them, this way of painting swords, armor, and just about everything you want to be shiny and impressive looking really set the Warhammer painting world on fire. And as early as 2012, you can see the top entries every single year dabbling in them in some capacity. And I think it's this sudden interest in non-metallics which led into what kind of became the thing to do at Golden Demon. And it's hard to explain, and maybe someone in the comments section who is smarter can do it better, but it's almost the idea of painting everything on your miniature to the 11th degree in a hyper-realistic and artistic manner. Like every single stone, belt buckle, and strand of hair on a miniature is painted with a light source, shading and highlights and some kind of effect, and it's like at this point people are painting full-on paintings onto their miniatures. I think that 2015 is a year where you can fully see this kind of thing come into play, as the top 3 miniatures in the single miniature category start to go beyond just neat and clean realistic paint jobs, and they start to demonstrate that the artists taking part are really exerting themselves and their capabilities to create incredible effects and push the boundaries of a painted miniature. And as the competition seemed to get fiercer and fiercer every single year, so the participants rose to the challenge laid down by their fellow artists, now in their hundreds all over the world. And at this time, it felt like every single year you'd turn up to Golden Demon and see something which would absolutely blow your mind, and that you'd never have thought would be possible on a Warhammer miniature. And I think it's this perfection of craft mixed with this spirit of competition which has carried Golden Demon into where we find it now in the roaring 20s. Not those 20s, the other way, that way. So at this point, we are in the 2020s. Like, right now, we're in it. Welcome to now. And it kind of feels like the standard at Golden Demon couldn't possibly get any higher. I mean, just look at some of these winning entries from the last couple of years. Like, how could they possibly be improving on this? And I think the answer to how the Golden Demon winners are going to start improving on perfection is that they have started to expand their creativity outside of the bounds of the miniature itself, and that sounds weird and confusing, so let me explain. We all know these guys can do non-metallics and insane freehanding, but what about resin pours conducted in science labs? Entirely doubled and inverted entries which create a mirror effect, or impossible rendering on scenic dioramas which look like they are straight from a video game, and incredible large-scale original miniatures and even busts sculpted and painted by the participants themselves. We're currently in a Golden Demon timeline when we're seeing the participants going above and beyond just the miniature itself for their Golden Demon entries, and starting to think of the entire pieces as opportunities to flex their creativity. And I think that this is particularly apparent, especially when it comes to the modern style of basing. Long gone are the days where just a plinth is considered to be fancy, because now these elaborate scenic sculpted and hand-painted backdrops are becoming more and more commonplace and popular amongst the top winners. And I've seen a lot of people online kind of saying they don't really like the way that Golden Demon is headed, and that Golden Demon should primarily be a painting competition, so they would ban things like kit bash miniatures and resin pours and things like that, so that the judges could just focus on the most important thing, which is the painting. But I personally really like this massive explosion of creativity that we've seen at Golden Demon recently, and it always has me so excited to see the next Golden Demon. So let me know in the comments section what your opinion is and how you would run the competition, and also what you think the next big Golden Demon meta will be. So to round up this little look back in time, and to kind of highlight and celebrate how far some of these Golden Demon participants have come during their illustrious careers, we are going to use this fun little feature on the Golden Demon Compendium to take a look at some of my favourite winners' first miniatures and compare it to some of their latest. And I think that this may end up being my favourite part of both the video and all of the research that I've done, because it's so important as creative people who are trying to improve our craft to remember that nobody gets good overnight, and perfection can take decades. So sorry if this embarrasses any of you Golden Demon painters, because here we go. With that uplifting bout of inspiration, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. As usual, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for being rogues. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Bye bye bye.